I said the First Amendment. I said the First Amendment of the Constitution. He said, what? I said, look, we are Americans. We have a constitution, and that constitution gives me the right to think freely and to publish whatever I want. No one can stop me. He was shocked. So yes, we need to take advantage of being here. And instead of talking to each other only, we need to talk to the other.
I mean,
To the Christian and to the Jew. I already put together 3 conferences. One here, it had 3 Jewish rabbis, several evangelicals, and several Muslims, talking about how we can come together peacefully based on our understanding and the reconciliation of our holy books. Then I decided that the best way we can benefit from these conferences, if we have them in Pakistan in Urdu, if we have them in the Arab world in Arabic, and if we have them in the Bengali language, and in Yamayalam, the language of Kerala, and alhamdulillah, Albanian, the work is progressing. And what my grandfather taught me is not necessarily what my children and grandchildren will have to accept. There is no hatred forever or love forever. We love people based on their understanding of our need and the way they treat us as equal. And we should do the same thing to them. Rasulullah said, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. So love is needed and is wanted. And this world we're living in is lopsided, as Sam was telling us a few minutes ago. This explosion in Istanbul, we already know that it killed 6 right away. And, I don't know how many people will die as a result, but we need peace. And in order to have peace, we need to understand if peace is sustainable. We're trying to study now the economy of peace. If we suggest to the Congress people and to the senators to switch our economy from a war economy into a peace economy, would that produce unemployment? Would that produce sustainability? Would it allow United States to continue to grow? So it's not talk. We need to study also. This is what a Muslim should do. React to the present he is living in, to the situation around him, and try to react the best possible way. This is, this is what we're doing now.
I need to welcome Mr. Hugh is with us right now, and I hope he can join us and talk about what he's hearing a little bit.
Hugh is here, and Hugh shared with me a while ago a video, and I watched that video with my wife, and the video was very interesting. I will let Hugh talk about that. I will stop.
I'm very happy to be here, and especially happy to hear. I've never met you before, Dr. Koskas. I'm pleased to meet you. Chicago is a great city. Is that where you're located?
No, I'm located in Fairfax, Virginia.
You're in Fairfax. Okay, well, I'm in Oakton, so I'm just down the street from you now.
Well, in 1978, I started a university in Chicago called East West University on Michigan Avenue, and it's still there. It's thriving.
Good. What you're saying is music to my ears. I absolutely believe that we need to be more open, more forgiving, and I particularly think the Americans, white Americans, need to be especially forward in coming to reach out to Muslims, to all other groups that are different. We have been the dominant culture here, and we've abused that in many ways. It's now incumbent on us to do to reach out and to try to understand and appreciate and just find good ways to interact with our Muslim brothers and sisters. We're all children of God. We we have different beliefs, we have different ethnic backgrounds, but we're united in our love and commitment to God, to follow God's ways. We follow it through Jesus and his discipleship. You follow it through Muhammad and his disciple and his leadership and so forth.
And Jesus.
And Jesus.
And Jesus too. Yes. So I would leave it at that. I'm just very happy to be here, to be part of this conversation.
I mean,
Here comes Dr. Suhail.
Dr. Suhail with us.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. How are you?
Alhamdulillah. From
Was enjoy-
Friday to Sunday.
I was enjoying the discussion.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
great discussion.
Thank you.
How is everybody doing?
Alhamdulillah. Fine.
alhamdulillah.
Good. Nice to have you in this conversation.
Dr. Suhail, the question I asked,
Hmm.
why the West hate us?
Why the West?
Hate us, hate Muslim, hate the Middle Eastern. Is this true or not? And if true, why? If not,
Oh, Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalam ala Rasulullah. That's a very, very tricky question because, I mean, it's full of words that need to be clarified. The West is not one entity. There is no one entity called West. As Dr. Hugh was mentioning, these are very diverse societies. Whether we're talking about the societies or talking about governments, very different views, very different policies. So there is no such thing as the West as one entity. So that's the problem with the question. And also there is no such thing as the West hates Muslims. We didn't see it. I mean, we have been living here for quite some time now, and it's not there. It's a failure on both sides. Failure on Muslims to make themselves and make their faith known,
Yes.
not only by words but also by action, and represented in the best possible way, because people usually don't like that which they don't know. And Islam is very mysterious religion, mainly because of the conflicting messages that come about Islam. There are many people talk about in the name of Islam and they're doing different things. So it's very confusing. You put yourself in their shoes. ISIS is speaking on behalf of Islam. Qaeda is speaking on behalf of Islam. So many acts were committed in the name of Islam. So put yourself in their shoes, something you don't know, and you keep hearing all these things about it or done in the name of that religion. So I think ignorance is a big issue here on both sides. There is lack of knowledge about Islam. Now imagine, for example, Dr. Hugh, who has been in contact with Muslims and was exposed and had the opportunity to ask questions and to read and etc. Just compare his level of awareness about Islam and Muslims to average American. There is no comparison. This is someone who read about the religion, who met those people, interacted with them, went to their mosque, invited them to his church, and found that these people are very different from probably what is being said about them. So it's a part of it is Muslims, even in the West, the fact they are isolated. I told you example, I mentioned this before. In the 90s, we were in a college town, Madison, Wisconsin.
Yes.
And we have an Islamic center in campus, basically where a lot of students are living, etc. So, and across the street, there are some apartments, and near the Islamic center were some apartments. And one time, someone asked a person who lives across the street, so what is this place here? So I don't know. It's a place, So on Friday, there are many people who come there and enter. We don't know what it is. So to that extent, you fail even to educate your neighbors about your presence and make your presence felt in a positive way. And then you have only yourself to blame. So that's on one hand, Islam is not well represented, neither by Muslims in the West nor by Muslims in the Muslim world. As you can see, majority of Muslim countries are in terrible situation. They are not like models that you can point to, and then you come and talk about your religion, but you don't have examples to show. On the other hand, also Muslims are not educating themselves enough about the West. I remember one statement was mentioned by a member of community who was leaving. He lived here for several years, graduated, and then the day he was leaving, he was giving a sermon, khutbah, and he said the statement that I really never forgot. He said that we came to America knowing what the Americans do in the weekend, but we learned what the Americans do in the weekdays. When we lived here, we learned what the Americans do in the weekdays. A lot of people in the Muslim countries, they have a very superficial understanding.
Hollywood.
Yeah, Hollywood and Madonna and Michael Jackson and those celebrities, and they think that's the West, yeah.
Yes.
It's ignorance on both sides that is being exploited by extremists on both sides. So basically, bigotry thrives on ignorance. The same questions is being asked in the West, why Muslims hate us. So it is question that is asked on both sides, and because of the, as I said, mainly because of the ignorance on both sides, and because the moderates on both sides are not doing their job, and they left big opportunity for the radicals and the extremists and bigots on both sides to capitalize on that and strengthen and reinforce this barrier between the two sides.
Hmm.
I don't know if anybody else has any other thoughts.
Could I say something? I went to Saudi Arabia it's been almost 11 years ago now. It'll be 11 years in December. I traveled a lot while I was there outside the country, but most of the time I was there. I went there expecting bigotry and hatred. I was afraid to walk on the street when I first got there. I expected that I would be kidnapped or someone would pull out a knife and cut my throat. After being there for only a few days, I went to Safi and I said, Dr. Safi, I need to replenish the cupboard. I need more food. Where can I go? And he walked me to his window and he pointed to a little mini market down the street. And then I said to him, well, that's quite a ways, but how am I going to get there? Is your driver here? He said, no, driver's off today. But I said, somebody's going to kidnap me. Somebody's going to, and he laughed. And he said, you're going to starve to death. Walk down the street to get what you need.
He tricked you.
Yeah. So yeah, he tricked me. But every time I walked by somebody on the street, I would turn around, look over my shoulder to make sure they didn't pull out a knife. I got to the mini market, walk inside. I was the only person dressed in Western clothes, and I was whiter than most. People would come up to me and they would say, where are you from? I would say, I'm from North America. I didn't want to say from the United States. But they would pin me down and they would say, are you from America? United States, and I'd eventually say yes. And they reached out and hugged me, and they
Yeah.
said, "Ahlan wa sahlan." I was shocked.
Yeah.
They invited me into their homes for dinner. They invited me for tea and coffee. And I began to build friendships. Nobody asked me if I was Muslim. Nobody asked me if I was a Christian. But eventually, just reading Dr. Safi's Quran, which made it very understandable to me, I would, and working on it and proofreading it, and asking questions 3 hours every morning. This lasted for 3 years.
Mm.
It was like getting a PhD in Islamic studies. And I'm very grateful to Safi and Iman Kaskas for bringing me to Saudi Arabia. You see, my mother taught me when I was a kid at First Baptist Church in Jefferson, Georgia, small town of about 1,800 people. My mother would take me to First Baptist Church, and she said, "Sammy, if you behave, I'll go with you to the library and you can take a book and I'll read it to you when we get home." They had a lot of children's books in the library.
Hmm.
And the book I got over and over again was called The God of Abraham.
Mm.
I would take it home. My mother would read it to me and she would tell me, "Sammy, Sammy, Sammy, when you're older, you have to pray to the God of Abraham. There's only one God." This is what I was taught as a Christian.
Hmm.
I think maybe 80 million Americans were taught this while they were going to Sunday school or vacation Bible school, but they have no idea what is Islam.
Hmm. Hmm.
And they're not going to find out unless we demonstrate the behavior of the Prophet Muhammad to them.
Yes.
Since I've been in Saudi Arabia, I've discovered that I was a Muslim. I have been all my life.
Mhm. Mhm.
I discovered that Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, he was a human rights activist, a
Mhm.
civil rights activist. His
Mhm.
last message, human rights, it was the Declaration of Medina or the Medina Constitution.
Mhm.
He was a women's rights activist. He ended
Mhm.
genocide, infanticide.
Mhm.
He made it possible for women to own property and they became more elevated in society. He was an animal rights activist.
Mhm.
We
Mhm.
all know the story of the crying camel
Mhm.
or the story of the prostitute who dipped her shoe in the water and gave a drink to a dog.
And went to heaven because of that.
Yeah, he
Mhm.
said she's going to be in Jannah.
Mhm.
Alhamdulillah. I was learning so much. I was all of these things as a Christian in America, but now I'm learning that Muslims believe the same things. I took a group of Muslim youth from Egypt and from Saudi Arabia. They went with me to Japan. And I took them to Hiroshima, to Ground Zero,
Mm.
where we Americans dropped the atomic bomb. And I knew enough about Islam by then that I knew that if Prophet Muhammad were on earth today, he'd be campaigning against nuclear weapons because they kill innocent people, they destroy crops and animals, they destroy religious buildings. All of that is against the law in Islamic war. Elderly are killed. We went to Ground Zero, the point where the bomb was dropped, and we got on our knees and we prayed for an end of nuclear weapons.
Mm.
The news media was there and they were laughing at us. I said, "You gotta be kidding. Muslims against nuclear weapons? Muslims against war?" And I said, "Yes.
Mhm.
Only war you can fight is you can defend yourself, but you can't fight a war of aggression."
Absolutely.
Yes.
And see, I was learning more and more. I'm so grateful that Safi took me out of the depression that I was in, grabbed me and took me to Saudi Arabia. I'm so grateful. And it was there that I began to learn. I had been to 3 Christian graduate schools. I had been to Christian college, Christian high school, but I never knew. And really, I learned so much about Christianity in Saudi Arabia. I learned things about the Bible that I never understood until I was living there. So it's been a wonderful experience, and I enjoy traveling around the world now with Muslim Voice for Peace, talking about my experience in the Middle East and what God has taught me through Safi's this new book that he's written on the Quran. It's an excellent book, and we need to promote it because it gives Christians and Jews a better understanding of what Islam is and what Christianity is.
Brother Asad, you have a question, I think. If you're still with us.
Do I have a question?
No, Brother Asad, I think he was raising his hand.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I want to say something here because I think, in my opinion, the problem is not among people. It's governments and politics. This is where it creates the biggest issue between people. So the governments are playing a role in this hate, in this dilemma that we are in right now. And because if we all fight, if they don't want us to unite, they don't want us to stand together, and that's their game. And the other issue is this colonialism. It didn't left the West opinion and some of the East too. Colonialism is still there, and everybody wanna dominate everybody, and that's why we're gonna continue with this struggle. I don't know for how long, but it's gonna stay for a long time.
I agree that part of it is governments, because one perception in the Middle East, and it's not only perception, it's unfortunately it's a reality, that for a long time, those oppressive and corrupt regimes in the Muslim world were sponsored and supported by the United States and by the West in general.
Great Britain.
Yeah, and if you add to that the blind support to Israel, that's causing a big problem. These are two major, to just confirm what Brother Asad was saying, these are two major problems that are political in nature. They are changing to some extent, because we have seen that United States and many Western countries have supported the Arab Spring, have let those oppressive regimes go. They did not support them when they were falling. They did some effort to promote democracy here and there, regardless of how we evaluate that, but those efforts. But at the end of the day, politics is about pursuing interests. It just has to be ethical. Governments are not like a charity organization. They are there to pursue their national interests. But I think that's a major source of the problem. Another major source of the problem that we have to do something about it is that in the last several decades, Islam was hijacked by some Salafi groups, some radical groups, and their version of Islam became dominant. The renaissance that took place in Islam, unfortunately, came through what is called political Islam and Salafism, and that became dominant not only among their members, but it is intimidating even to the masses. So nobody dares to oppose those people. They were able, because for some time they were sponsored by governments, like the Wahhabi movement was sponsored by petrodollars, so a lot of money behind it. And that money build a lot of published a lot of literatures, audio video material, and then satellite channels, and then social media sites. So that became dominant, even though you have a small group who managed to hijack a religion of the masses, and even the masses who don't disagree, don't agree with them, they either sometimes following them without knowing, or repeating their beliefs without knowing, or they are being intimidated. So you have the masses were divided in two groups, basically. Group was following without unconsciously, because that's the dominant version of Islam. So whatever they are saying, it became Islam, not their views of Islam. So, and you have the other group or the other section of the masses who didn't buy this version of it, but they are intimidated because these are very, very vocal, and their version of Islam became so prominent and dominant that nobody dares to oppose it. Because if you oppose it, you can find yourself attacked, and you maybe even your beliefs will be questioned and everything. So this is a major problem that has to be fixed. It is long overdue for people to stand up to this and then reclaim our faith that was hijacked, and dare to say, sorry, you can say whatever you want, that's your Islam, that's not mine. And we should not be intimidated, or should not be afraid, because a lot of what they're saying is their views, and sometimes it's a very minority views even in the history of Islam,
and contradictory to the Quran.
And sometimes it's contradictory to the Quran. And they created a big mess in the interpretation of the Quran, in the interpretation of the Hadith and the Sunnah. And then some things came from culture and heritage, and they found their ways to become religious. So we have a big mess in front of us, and the more we let it go, the more it's going to create problems, not only in the relationship between Muslims and the West. It's even among Muslims themselves. We have young generations nowadays who are faced with a very tough choices between version of Islam that are not appealing. The traditional version is not appealing. The political Islam is not appealing. So you have these young people, they found themselves have to accept this radical, simplistic view of Islam, or abandon their religion altogether, because we failed to come up with an understanding that can inspire them and empower them and help them succeed in this life, and does not create a tension inside them between their personal ambition and between their different aspects of their identity, because each one has a number of identities together, and they have to be consistent, not contradictory. You are a Muslim, you are American, you belong to this family, you belong to this neighborhood, to this city, to this county, to the state. All of these belonging, or all of these aspects of your identity, they should never contradict. They should never, because if they become contradictory, then they create tension inside. And that's what we have in young Muslims in America.
Yeah.
Young Muslims in America are finding it very hard to reconcile those versions of Islam with them being a good citizen and successful in this country, because they're not coherent, they're not compatible.
Yeah, I would say this is not America alone, the young people here. I speak with Muslim youth all over the world. In Norway, a few years ago in Oslo, I was speaking and I told the Imam, I need a break. I need to walk down the street. So I need some fresh air. So I walked down the street and I see a young man. He was 18 years old. He's leaning against the wall and his eyes were all blurry. I knew that something was going on. So I got closer. He's got needle tracks going up and down his
Hmm.
up and down his arm. He's doing heroin, shooting heroin.
Hmm.
And I said, it looks like you need help. He reached out to me. He said, help me, help me, help.
Mhm. Mhm.
I said, oh. I said, what's your name? He said, my name's Mohammed.
Mhm.
This is all over the world.
Yeah, yeah,
It's in Germany.
everywhere.
It's in Detroit. Young people
Yeah.
come to me.
Mhm.
They say, where can I get help for alcohol and drugs?
Mhm.
It's in Saudi Arabia in the prisons.
Everywhere.
Hundreds and hundreds of Saudi teenagers
Mhm.
in prison in Bremen. My
Mhm.
assistant Asa Haj Hussein and I go there to speak with the prisoners. Most of them
Everywhere.
are teenagers.
Yeah. It's a
They
big.
say, why are you here? Drugs and alcohol, stealing to get drugs and alcohol. And this is everywhere.
It's a
And
huge
the
problem.
mosque, we need to recognize the problem and we need to offer help.
May I
Mhm.
say something?
Okay,
Yeah.
Dr. Sami, Safi, go ahead.
Actually, the question, I don't like to discuss theoretical questions or things outside our ability to influence.
Mm. Mm.
But that leads us to a very, very important question here in the United States, in Fairfax County, in Northern Virginia. We Muslim are going to lose our children if we don't change the way we think from an 8th and 9th century way into a 21st century way. If we
Mhm.
don't think Quran is dynamic, if
Mm.
we don't think that the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was solving problems of his time based on that time, he
Mm.
never gave a solution for a 21st century in the 7th century.
Mhm.
We need to exert ourselves the way he did, learn his methodology of solving problems, and start thinking about our problems based on what the Quran today is telling us.
I mean,
The Quran is a book that most Muslims don't understand. The script is fixed, but the meaning is very dynamic.
Mhm. Mhm.
The meaning will never be the same meaning the people during the time of the Prophet understood the Quran with. We have to understand it with fresh eyes,
Mm.
with the tools of knowledge available to us today. This is why when I did my Quran translation, I called it the Quran a contemporary understanding.
Mm.
A contemporary understanding. فهم معاصر. If we don't use a contemporary understanding all the time to understand the Quran, we'll be stuck in the past. The most famous exegesis of the Quran, Ibn Kathir, lived almost 900 years ago. He was the best of his time. Unfortunately, some Muslims go back to Ibn Kathir if they want to understand the Quran today. You mean to tell me in the last 800-900 years, nothing changed in this world? I mean, Ibn Kathir understand At-Tariq as the late night comer. And then, you know, he understood it to be maybe a late rising planet, because it says An-Najm Al-Thaqib. Well, today we understand it to be a pulsar. Today, I have a link in my Quran translation to NASA. It tells you that the pulsar sounds like this.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
All you have to do is go to that link, or sometimes see, I don't want to go into the detail to the life of a star and when it become a pulsing star, but this is a fact. All you have to do is ask Sheikh Google. It'll tell you all about it. It's all there, you know. So basically, our generation today, you and I, need to pay attention to our children and grandchildren, maybe to our grandchildren more than our children. My generation failed to understand the importance of understanding the Quran in a dynamic manner. Maybe our grandchildren need to learn to think critically in order to question everything I'm teaching them. And Dr. Suhail is teaching them, and Sam is telling them, and everybody is teaching them. They need to question it. And then they will probably need to learn that all science is from God. All science. In Islam, there is no contradiction between civil science and religious science. This was a myth that was spread in previous century, and the result is the backwardness we Muslims are in today. It's not a matter of whether we love the West or the West love us. It's a matter of what are we do to present ourselves in the best light possible. Lately, I've been putting together conferences, and those conferences have Jews. The conference we had several weeks ago had 3 rabbis, several evangelical preachers, several Muslims. Then it was very successful. Then we decided the title was the peace based on our reconciliation of holy books. Peace based on the reconciliation of our holy books. And basically, I have, after I did the Quran translation, I did this book, basically to reconcile the Bible with the Quran. Anytime we found a verse from the Quran, all the top part is Quran. We put a verse from the Bible here that has the same meaning. We have over 20,000 copies sold already.
Very interesting.
Yes, and universities teach it, use it as a curriculum now. Institutes, churches, mosques. Imam Majid endorsed it, by the way, several years ago on YouTube. Anyway, what we need to be doing in United States is to build coalitions, bring our Christian friend together with our Jewish friend, with us, our Muslim brothers and sisters, and together we need to find the fanatism, anti-minority, the feeling that we don't belong, the feeling that we're not American enough. These are things we're living every day. And neither Jesus would approve of them, nor would the Quran approve of them, nor would the Torah approve of all these. And our holy books have enough teaching for us to get together and spread peace. Peace is necessary. There is a new peace paradigm that needs to replace the war paradigm that is dominant in the United States right now. We have to work for that. And this is within my ability to do. Any congressman office is less than 20 minutes away from my house. I've done it before. I went there, knock on the door, and I said, I have something to share with you today. Any particular issue? No, I want to share with you background knowledge about the Middle East or Islam. Oh, you have 5 minutes, come on in. But in these 5 minutes, I have to have an issue that is based on realities, issues that he can identify with too. So now we're studying the economy of peace. Is peace sustainable to replace the war paradigm? If we close the industrial military establishment and replace it with peace, would it create unemployment? Would it send people home looking for jobs? We need to study all this is how a Muslim can be active in his society and change his surrounding, like Dr. Suhail was saying last Friday and the Friday before in his khutbah of Friday. If we cannot exercise change and make our presence felt in our society, then we might as well not be here. We're useless. We're not serving any purpose. The only way we can be positive is to be in an integral part of this community we're living in. Unfortunately, I just voted a couple of days ago, but we didn't have any Muslim running for any position here. Not because I prefer Muslims to others at all, but to get Muslim, because look, in 1973, I started the Islamic Center of New Orleans, the first Islamic center in that town. And at that time, most Muslims thought participating in the election is against Islam. Today, the results show that there are 138 new Muslim elected to city and state positions in this last election.
Mhm.
That makes me feel very proud that those people change those wrong ideas their fathers and their grandfathers have, and decided to be an integral part of this country. This is the only country we have right now, the only place that will allow me to speak freely, to write a book without a permission of a governmental agency and publish it.
Mhm.
I was telling the brothers before you came, Dr. Suhail, a Saudi friend of mine said, who gave you permission to translate the Quran? I said, the First Amendment of the Constitution. That's where I got my permission. And I'm very proud of that.
Mhm.
I'm very proud to be an American with a constitution. The first thing Prophet Muhammad did when he went to Medina is to give the people a contract. We call it today a constitution. He called it a contract.
Mhm.
We have a contractual religion. If
Mhm.
we want to buy and sell, we write a contract. If you want to get married, we write a contract. He told him, you want me to govern you without clear rights and duties?
Mhm.
Let me give you a contract to show my rights and my duties toward you. And
Mhm.
as a result, we have the Constitution of Medina.
Mhm.
Anyway, I don't want to talk too much. That's tells you where I am, what I like to encourage everybody to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Safi, and I cannot really agree more. Our main duty that we have abandoned for a long time, and we failed or we did not try to do, is to contextualize the text.
Yes.
I like the statement that you made. The text is fixed. The interpretation should be dynamic.
Yes.
Why? Because life is changing.
Yes.
And it is very embarrassing and shameful for Muslims now to rely on interpretation that were made several hundred years ago. It's very shameful and very embarrassing, which means that for several hundred years, you did not produce anything, that you're now still saying Ibn Kathir or saying this tafsir and this interpretation. These people, they interpreted Quran for their context. So the main duty of Muslims at all times and all places is to take the text, to contextualize it, to produce fresh understanding of Islam. In the same way, I always use this as to prove my point. I say, before Prophet Muhammad, there used to be a messenger, special messenger sent to special people in special time.
Yes.
Those messages were not preserved because they don't have that flexibility to be suitable for all times and all places. They were customized to those people and to that time. And that's why God did not preserve them. They disappeared. Now, with the Prophet Muhammad, God sent a universal message with universal message that is suitable for all times and all places. And he promised to preserve the text, but he assigned us the task to keep it relevant.
To understand.
Yeah, to keep it relevant and to do the same job that was done before by sending a new messenger with a new message. Now, Muslims, wherever they are, they have to develop their own fresh understanding, not new message, not new revelation, but from the same revelation, coming up with that dynamic interpretation or contextualize the text to their context. And that doesn't take anything away from the Quran. Quran is valid for all times and all places. It doesn't mean that every verse is valid for all times and all places. And it doesn't mean that it is valid for all times and all places through the literal meaning. It is valid for all times and all places because it has the ability to inspire and inform life in all times and all places. But you shouldn't be lazy to take all the verses and apply them everywhere or apply them literally. Because there is one thing that Dr. Safi mentioned, I also keep emphasizing all the time, that we have to understand that Quran was doing two things at the same time. Unless we understand this, we're not gonna properly understand Islam. Quran was addressing the problems of that time, the problems that were facing by that community at that time. At the same time, Quran was stating principles that are universal and timeless.
Yes.
Unless you can discern and distinguish between foundational verses that have principles that are timeless and universal, like no compulsion in religion. That's a principle. There is no compulsion in religion. This is not something that is contextual. That's one of those foundational verses. And you have to distinguish between some verses that were revealed to address specific incident at that time. And Quran did this in an amazing way. But where Muslims failed is when they mix the two types of verses. When they mix the two types of verses, and they stopped distinguishing between what is foundational in Quran, what is a principle, and what was contextual, was related to that. For example, the word kafir, disbeliever, in most cases in Quran was addressing people who were fighting Muslims at that time, not someone who is peacefully living with Muslims. So, because at that time, almost the two words are identical or confounded, that those who rejected the Islam, they were fighting it. So, unless you understand that context, and you know that's not transferable, cannot transfer it. For example, I mentioned this also. You live in the United States, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of conscience, freedom of everything, organizing, it's guaranteed by the Constitution.
Yes.
If Prophet Muhammad had that in Mecca, he would not even migrate to Medina. There is no need to migrate. He migrated because of oppression, because of lack of that freedom, and because of that persecution.
Yes.
So as a Muslim here, your job is, if you properly understand Islam, is to defend that constitution that is guaranteeing freedom. Muslims somewhere else may be living under oppressive regimes. Their job is to resist that oppression to guarantee freedom. Muslims in other part of the world, they may be living under occupation. Their duty becomes to resist that occupation to free their land. You cannot apply the same verses or the same principle everywhere. These are very different contexts. And we have to realize that if we want to succeed, if we ever were going to succeed in contextualizing the text, we have to revive an important part of our religion, which is called maqasid, or overarching goals of Islam. Islam should not be understood literal meaning. Islam came to achieve certain goals, major goals. And I came up with a list of 7, and I still believe these are the overarching goals of Islam. On top of them was justice. That's a verse in Quran in which Allah says, لَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا رُسُلَنَا بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ وَأَنزَلْنَا مَعَهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْمِيزَانَ لِيَقُومَ النَّاسُ بِالْقِسْطِ. This is in Surah Al-Hadid. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that we send messengers and revelation so that to establish justice. So justice becomes really the top goal of Islam. And then peace, security, freedom, human dignity, prosperity, virtue. These are what I believe from the Quran and from the authentic saying of the Prophet. These are the 7 goals that Islam came to achieve. The job of Muslims is how you can contextualize the Quran or the text to come up with an understanding that can help Muslims coming back to the idea of being an agent of change or contributing to the greater good, that will make Muslim will contributing to the greater good and to the promotion of these goals, to the promotion of these 7 goals. You drop this, like the Salafi school done, you drop these goals, then you end up with the literal meaning of Islam that is very rigid, that is not flexible, that cannot apply in different contexts. And if you embrace that understanding, it will make you a foreigner in your own countries. Yes. We have seen Americans here, both African Americans and white Americans, who, after they become Muslim or convert to Islam or revert to Islam, they become foreigner in their own countries. They cannot even interact with their families and they with their in their workplace, etc. And sometimes they even dress the way the Middle Eastern dress, as if that's part of the package or part of the religion. It's very wrong, because this religion is meant to become indigenous wherever it goes. It has to mesh with the indigenous culture to produce a version of Islam that is relevant and that is indigenous. And you should never take it from one part of the world to another part, or from one era to the history to another era. And you think by translating Arabic to English, you did your job. No, it's not translation. It's contextualization that is needed. And if we're gonna limit ourselves to translating work that was done centuries ago or thousands of miles away, we are being lazy. We're failing our job, and we are taking the shortcut, which is take a book of Ibn Kathir or Ibn Taymiyyah or whatever and translate it to English. That's not your job. Your job is to come up with an understanding that it's a much more difficult task, but that's your duty. And it's not because it is difficult or because it is risky, then we go for the easy way, which has never worked and will never work. You will never succeed to convince future generations with a version of Islam that was produced back in history or in a different culture. That's never worked and never will.
Jazakallahu khairan.
Any other thoughts or questions?
Mr. Hugh, I have a question for you. In Islam, you hear we are talking of the new generation, they are not appealing to the religion. I think the Christian, they have same problems, right? And how they try to solve it.
Yeah. Yeah, 60%.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that
Yeah.
we have some, in listening to you talk, I'm hearing the same conversations that we're having in Christianity. And one of the things that we have, one of our problems is that there's a lot of misinterpretation, misunderstanding of the Bible, of who wrote the Bible, who wrote, it wasn't just one person writing. I think that's one of the advantages that the Muslims have, is that one person wrote the Quran in about 20 years, I believe. The Bible is a collection of books written by maybe 100 different people over 1,000 years. And there's a question on who wrote what part, and did Jesus really say this, or did Jesus really not? So part of that problem is then learning how to talk about that in our churches, and that we have that same problem here of people not wanting to make waves. They don't want to sound like they're radicals. And so they don't ask those questions. What is the nature of God? What is the nature of prayer? What is the nature of Jesus? Was he really God? Was he really just man? These kinds of questions. So we need to have forums where these things can be discussed. And that's a problem. We don't have that. And that's particularly off-putting to young people or anybody who's interested in Christianity. The other thing I wanted to come back to that gets to your question, Bassem, about why does the West hate? We have a problem here in the United States. We've had it for about 400 years, and that's discrimination against Blacks, and by extension, anybody else who doesn't look white. And I think what we've learned in the last 7 years since the Trumpism came into being is that we've brought this problem out into the open in the way that we haven't in the past. I think the last 2 elections show that slowly the country is beginning to deal with this. We're moving away from it, I think. But that's a huge problem, and it extends not just to African Americans, but it extends to anybody who doesn't look like me. And so I think that's part of the problem. But I'm optimistic about the changes that are going on. These problems have to be addressed, and they're slowly. They won't be completely addressed in my lifetime or yours probably. But that's the issue we have right now, I think. This original sin in America that generalizes to other ethnic groups, including Muslims. And then the same problem that you have is making the Bible relevant and for the times.
That's interesting.
May I add to what Dr. Suhail said something, because I think what he talked to us about today is essential, and we need to keep our eyes on it rather than spread thin, talking about 100 different things. He's talking about the relevance of the Quran then and today only if we understand it in a dynamic way.
Mhm.
To use a language of philosophy, we have to have a dialectical relationship with the Quran, and we can always come out with something new. But there is a term in the Quran that some Muslims don't pay much attention to it. And that term, we always say that we're the best community that God gave to the world because we enjoin good and forbid bad. Actually, the Quran doesn't say that. It says, تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر. The word ma'ruf is not good. The word ma'ruf, it's the word, it has a relative meaning. Ma'ruf is what is known to be good at a particular place at a particular time. And if you understand it in a different way, you will go into that tunnel vision that what was good in the 7th century is good today. Not necessarily, my friend. The Quran could have said, تأمرون بالخير وتنهون عن الشر. But he didn't say that. It says, تأمرون بالمعروف. That means you have to think about a particular act that you are witnessing today and decide for yourself, is it acceptable based on today's standards? That's ma'ruf. Or munkar, is it unacceptable in today's standard? And the Quran is the only book I know of our holy books that have those relative meanings. And it is not, we're not doing ourselves any favors by not paying attention to that specific meaning of these two words, ma'ruf and munkar. They're very relative. Thank you.
Yeah. And then at the end of chapter 7, Surah Al-A'raf, خذ العفو وأمر بالعرف
Now,
وأعرض عن الجاهلين. I don't know which verse is this exactly. Let's search the verse. Yeah, it's verse 199. Verse 199, be tolerant and command. Sometimes they translate what is right. وَأْمُرْ بِالْعُرْفِ. Al-'urf is, as Dr. Safi was mentioning, is whatever known to be good at that time, whatever is acceptable in that society, as long as it does not contradict
of course,
a major principle or
Yes,
a fixed principle. So, خُذِ الْعَفْوَ وَأْمُرْ بِالْعُرْفِ, meaning promote that which is acceptable at that time and good. And of course, there are things that do not change and should never change. Like, for example, lying or cheating should never become good or acceptable. Even if it is accepted in a certain society, that should be something wrong that you have to work against it. But there are things that are variable. I mean, things that were not considered.
Style of clothing.
For example, that's a culture, that's more cultural.
Yeah.
So people have to be, again, unless we bring back the emphasis on the overarching goals of Islam and use them as compass, so that we don't fall in the literal meaning and the rigid meaning, unless we distinguish between what is essential in Islam, what is foundational, and what is contextual. And the things that are foundational, they're not many. Actually, to the point, even things are forbidden in Islam. There is a golden rule that I firmly believe in it, that everything is lawful unless proven otherwise. We have a Salafi school who reversed this to make everything haram, everything is prohibited or forbidden unless proven otherwise. So this religion, when it talks in Quran, talks about, let me tell you what was forbidden, because what is
Surah
forbidden
Al-An'am.
is the short list.
Yes,
قل
Surah
تعالوا-
Al-An'am,
Yeah,
151.
قل تعالوا أتلوا ما حرم ربكم عليكم.
Exactly.
It doesn't say, let me tell you what is halal, what
Yeah.
is lawful. Let me tell you what is forbidden.
Yes.
So unless we do that, unless we reclaim our religion, we reconcile it with science in a genuine way, not in an artificial way. We reconcile it with the modernity. We reconcile it with we reinforce the human dimension in Islam, and put an end to this dichotomy that sees the world as Muslims and non-Muslims. We're gonna have to raise a generation who see an individual as first as a human being, and therefore it's this person is your brother or sister in humanity. It's a large family called humanity. And then this person is your fellow citizen. That's the second thing that you have to think of. And then third, this person is your neighbor or your colleague or whatever commonalities you have between them, or you're living in the same city or the same neighborhood or whatever. And after all of these comes that whatever the religion this person is following, and that's none of your business. It's not your business to change it, and that
Wow.
should not affect any of the other relationships. All the rest, the remaining relationships should be there, regardless of the religion that this person chooses, and regardless whether this person accepts Islam or rejects it. That should not affect any of the other aspects of your relationship with them. That's not what is dominant among Muslims nowadays,
Right.
because of this trend
Yeah.
that has unfortunately is very vocal and very dominant and prominent. It's still the dichotomy, Muslims versus non-Muslims. That's how people unfortunately have that mindset. And in addition, of course, to the issue with history, that some people think that the history of Muslims, that's something that is part of Islam and we need to revive it, even though Quran is very clear that history is only good for lessons, and that history was history of Muslims, not history of Islam. It's a history of individuals, and it has some bright spots, and it has also some very bad era that happened into it. And the only thing that is useful from that history is to learn lessons, not to stick to it and get stuck in history like we have this embarrassing Shia and Muslim issues nowadays, that people are fighting over something that happened 1400 years ago or 1500 years ago. Not to get stuck in it, and not to try to revive it like many groups are trying. They're still dreaming that having a khilafah and somebody who's ruling us and ruling all Muslims, and that's the ideal system of government, and that's Islamic system of government that we need to revive. That's not true. That's a dictatorship, that's totalitarian regimes. We don't want it back at all, and we should be the first to resist it, because it caused us a lot of trouble in history. So it's unlike there are groups that are trying to revive that, and there should be really vocal Muslims who say no, that history, first of all, was history of Muslims. It's a mixed bag, and it is only good for lessons. Shouldn't get stuck in it. We should not get stuck in those understanding or in those issues or in those problems, and we should not try to reactivate it or revive it again, because again, history is only good for lessons.
Just a short comment. I cannot comment while you guys are, everybody has better knowledge than me. But for this example of Khilafah, what they did, they ignored the main essence, the overarching goals, the maqasid, and they looked at some words that came here and there. What I call is manufacturing of evidence. So they looked at a few hadith here and there. Maybe these hadith are not that strong, and they made it because it was mentioned khilafah here, or إذا كان خليفتين فاقتلوا الآخر منهما. Look, اقتلوا. So it's easy to kill people. This is another issue that's spread out in our fiqh. But anyway, I mean, they created a system. They call it Islamic, based on a very vague or weak actually evidence. And they what they did, they ignored maybe the justice, the shura, which is democracy or freedom of speech and all that, just to make sure based on going to history, because it wasn't the history. Not only that, they justify all of the disasters that happened during this Khilafah system. Look at the justification. They call it al-mustabid al-adil. The dictator who is just, but he wasn't just.
Contradiction of terms.
It's you're right. It's very unfortunate. A lot of these ideas were promoted during those regimes and
Yes.
by those regimes.
Yes.
That's what we forgot. We forgot that a lot of the heritage books were developed at a time where Muslims were really stagnant and then under dictatorship,
Yes.
and they were sponsored by those dictators.
Yes.
That's why there are essential elements of Islam were neglected, and by design, not by coincidence. And there are minor aspects of Islam that were promoted, and a lot of books were done about them to promote a version of Islam that serves those regimes, that keep people busy and fighting each other on very marginal and minor issues, and ignore the essence of this religion. Because if they know the essence of the religion, they will not accept dictatorship. They will be advocating justice, etc. And that's not in the interest of those families or dynasty that were in charge at that time.
Let me share something with you from my experience of working with the Quran for at least 25 years now. After I finish my Quran translation, and that job took 6 years, specifically from the day I sat down. A couple of months after I finished, I asked myself a question. What is this book trying to tell me? What's the essence of this book? I mean, I worked with it day and night, full time for 6 years on the same chair, same window, same everything, and same ilham, same ideas coming to me from the Quran to talk about it. I came out with an idea that shocked me to start with. The essence of the Quran is freedom. Freedom. Allah gave me a freedom to choose. He wants me first to choose Him as our creator, then to choose to be a Muslim, number 2, and then to come closer to Him, practicing Islam by loving other human beings, all human beings. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. We have honored all human beings, not just Muslim, not Muslim and Christian, not Muslim, Christian and Jew, all human beings. So unless as Muslims living in the United States, learn to love Allah because He is worthy of being loved, and serving other human beings because that's the direct way to get closer to Allah, we will never get anywhere. This is how you change ما بأنفسنا. Dr. Suhail talked, إن الله لا يغير ما بقوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم. And ما بأنفسهم been a mystery. What's within themselves been a mystery for me. I'm 78 now. It's been a mystery for 78 years almost. What is it that we need to change exactly? The way we think about ourselves. The root of Muslim and the root of Islam, it's the same. Silm, Sin, Lam, Mim, Silm, which means peace. So Islam, when we say religion of peace, it's because that's the way it translates. And a Muslim should translate as peacemaker. Unless I personally start thinking of myself as a peacemaker and teach my grandson that he should grow up to be a peacemaker, we will never change the situation we're in today. We're not here to dominate the rest of the world. The world is not divided into Dar al-Harb and Dar al-Islam. The world is one. The world is all open for us. the word is, the word is allowing us to talk, we need to say only what's good and what is soothing to other people. So we will be known as healers,
Mhm, mhm,
peacemakers,
mhm.
you know, helpers to others, servant. You know, the word servant is like an insult when we call another, oh, you're a servant. Well, I learned from my Christian friends that Jesus was a servant leader.
Mhm.
And then I learned that Prophet Muhammad SAW said the leader of the people is their servant. You
Mhm,
can't be a servant, a leader, unless you are a servant.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah, so we need to change the fundamental ideas we learn from childhood over there, back
Mhm,
home,
mhm.
into the American values, freedom that I have, that I will fight for,
Mhm,
freedom for others,
mhm,
freedom of religion, which
Mhm.
is one of the values of Constitution of Medina.
mhm.
We need to go back to that same values Prophet Muhammad established in that contract in Medina, which Jefferson put here in the Constitution of the United States.
Mhm.
This is how we will change. If we don't do this, we'll still be a minority, despised, hated by our neighbors.
I can't agree more. Yeah,
This is
it's
it.
a it's
Thank
a
you.
huge transformation
Yes, indeed.
because these things accumulated over centuries, and unfortunately, a lot of them were these misconceptions were taken for granted,
Yes.
and we have this confusion between what is foundational and what is contextual, between religion and culture, what is historic and what is religious. It's a total mess that is there now, and that's the mess that we are presenting to future generations, and that's why they're not accepting it.
Yes.
It's total mess. I
Yes.
mean, I keep saying a lot. Sometimes people don't like it. I say, you are surprised that there are no young people in the mosque, and when I walk into the mosque and they find a young person, that's why I'm surprised. I say, how this person, what brought this person to the mosque? There is nothing attractive in what we have to offer, or there is nothing appealing. It's only create tensions in them and maybe shackles and preventing them from thriving. So it's a major transformation, and I call it rediscovering our faith. It's basically whatever is there now, it's beyond repair. You cannot fix it. It just have to come up with fresh understanding, and by going back to the roots and bypass all these heritage books and take the original text and then contextualize them, a job that we avoided for long time. And the longer we avoid it, the harder it's going to become.
Yes.
But it's long overdue that we do that, and we should not be afraid. This is a religion that guarantees a reward, even for those who try and fail.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
if you exercise your intellectual exercise and try to come up with an interpretation, and it turns out to be wrong, you're going to still have one reward. If it turns out to be right, then you have two. So you're guaranteed. Or I mean, there is nothing more encouraging to exercise ijtihad and intellectual creativity than this, when you are guaranteed that you're going to be rewarded, even if your results are, you come up with the wrong results, provided that you have the proper intention and you're trying to do it right. So it's a big job, but we cannot delay it any further. It's really, we have to come out and reclaim our faith from those who have hijacked it for a long time, and then rediscover the original and true faith that is very inspiring, very empowering, not only consistent, very compatible with science and very compatible with the success in this life and etc. It's if it does not produce happiness and success, then you have to question your understanding
Yes.
of the
Yes.
religion. And if it does not make you an agent of change and someone who is have a positive impact and significant contribution to the greater good as an individual or as a community, then you have to question your understanding of the religion.
Alhamdulillah.
Brother
alaikum,
Sam,
Dr.
go
Sahel.
ahead. Yeah, go
Alaikum
ahead.
assalam.
Brother Emina.
Thank you so much for all the inspiring and enlightening discussion. My point is, the thing that, mashallah, we see that is hopeful in us is of course, the great legacy of our beloved Prophet ﷺ, and the way we as Muslim, in terms of compassion and welcoming that we have. When I listen to the conversion story of Brother Sam, it was very touching, and it's something that I have experienced, and I've had it from many converts, especially those who visit Muslim families and countries. So it's something that we really value. We take it very serious, from the way the Prophet ﷺ taught us to be, generous to guests and to be welcoming. Like, it's almost like the issue of discrimination is kind of not so much ingrained, alhamdulillah, to some extent, of course, but I feel like this is something that is, alhamdulillah, good in us, and that we can use for greater cause of this deen. But the only thing, maybe the major thing that is pushing us back, is the lack of empowering knowledge that we have about our deen. Like, because a lot of us are brought to Islam from, like, kind of inherited it, and knowing that, yeah, we are Muslim, we pray and stuff like that, but we don't have that message of an empowerment and inspiring message to to make us more confident of who we are, of our identity. So we kind of a lot of time don't really want to share, or don't really want to be, especially for the young people, maybe don't really want to be identified as so, because and especially here, I see that most of the kids, they grow up going to the Sunday school, one time getting that Quran and maybe some basics of it, and that's all they know about Islam. And after maybe second, third grade, that's it. They are done with knowing Islam, until the child decide, okay, now I want to understand Islam, or who I am as a Muslim. So the trend is like that. So we grow up knowing, yes, I am a Muslim and blah, but I don't have that deep knowledge of my faith. So I don't want to be, we don't become very grounded, and we don't end up following the true values of what we stand for. So I think what's really maybe one of the ways we can work on, I don't know if there's kind of an institution that works on this, but even the Islamic schools that we see here, there's some who are doing really great, but there are others, like the kids go there, but we haven't had a curriculum that really can help this young generation to really have this context of beauty of knowing as Muslim, and especially for American families, American young children, to know their identity, to know what we can do to be well into the system, so there is that need for our institution, our masajid, our Islamic schools. There's always coming up these schools and the Islamic schools, mashallah, and all that, but there's no, this message is still lacking. So the message of knowing what Quran is, who's prophet, how can we understand prophets in our time? How can, like, I feel so sad when children from around 10, around 6 to 10 years, they have no idea of who prophet is, or what really the message of Islam is. If you ask them like simple question about why we are Muslim, and then we were like, subhanallah, where are we heading? You know, we're losing this generation. So where, as parents, we are behind, and our kids are also, we are just focused on Quran, and even the Quran is not even, you know, deeply. So what, like, I don't know what to say more.
Sorry, Sister Amina.
I think the point is clear. I think it's inshallah, we'll come back to this another time, but yes, we can keep talking about the role of Islamic centers and Islamic schools, but at the end of the day, the prime responsibility is for the individual themselves. Individuals and parents, they have to realize that their main duty is to educate themselves about the essence of this religion. And when I say educate yourself about Islam, it doesn't mean go and read fatwa or heritage book. Read the essence that we have been discussing today, the essence of the religion, so that you can communicate it to your children. And then your job is to develop yourself into a role model and to build a model family so that your child will be attracted to this religion. Without that fundamental part, no matter how good the work Islamic centers do, and the Islamic school is not going to make up for that. So it is about time to accept responsibility, that at the end of the day, it is an individual responsibility, and then collective. When everybody does their job, then we can come together and take care of the collective work that is beyond the capacity of any individual or family to do, but not as a substitute. It is not like the school, the Islamic school or Islamic center will do the job of the parents. It's not going to happen. So it is about time for every Muslim to realize that you must and you can understand Quran and study it and understand your religion. It is not true that this Quran and this religion is only for the scholars or only for some people. It's for everybody. Allah made it easy for everybody to understand if you make the effort. Start today, not even tomorrow. Start that journey of rediscovering your faith, understanding the essence of it. And in doing this, first of all, there is so much material available now online, etc. But also you can ask help for someone to mentor you and to guide you in this process. But there is no alternative to individuals doing their job of rediscovering that faith, educating, study the Quran, educate yourself about the essence of the religion and the original inspiring and empowering faith of yours, and then incorporate that in your life so that children will grow up, first of all, will be taught the true Islam, and they will see it. They will see the example. And there is nothing more efficient than leading by example and telling your child to do as you do, not telling your child to do as you say, telling your child to do as you do. And that's where we're failing big time. Families are failing to educate their children or give them the proper understanding of Islam because they don't have it, and you cannot give that which you don't have. And second, families are failing to show the beauty of Islam in their behavior and in their interaction with their children. And that there is nothing that can make up for that. No community effort, no Islamic school, no Islamic center can make up for the failure of individuals to do their job.
Jazakallah khair, Dr. Suhail. Jazakumullah.
Very good conversation.
Everybody, yeah.
Very glad to have it.
Hopefully we can have it next week, inshallah.
I mean, can we have just final closing comments from Dr. Safi and Brother Sami? quickly, or Brother Hugh, if you want.
My only closing comments is that at Good Shepherd Church, we have a potluck every third Sunday, 11 to 15. We would love to see you come there and share a meal with us.
Great.
Thank you.
I'll be there.
I can assure you that I will be there. God
I will come
willing.
with you.
Great.
Yes.
The next one's next Sunday,
All
Okay.
right.
11:15.
11:15, Good Shepherd United Methodist Church, 2351 Hunter Mill Road. We'd love to see you there.
Sam
Thank
and
you.
I coming together, and I'll bring my wife with me.
Sounds
Great.
good.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for this particular forum, Dr. Suhail and the brothers and the sisters. I really enjoyed being with you today, and I commit to be with you every Sunday if you want me.
Oh, for
And
sure.
yes, and I
Course,
think
course.
we need to discuss maybe doing some videos specifically about the topic you raised. What are the things that Muslims need to know today
Mhm.
about the basic facts of Islam? Let's don't leave it to people necessarily because they might find it, but let's make it easy on them.
Mhm.
If we identify them, let's talk about them.
Mhm.
And then probably that will give them a shortcut. So if we say, don't listen to what was tradition, but try to think about it yourself and implement it, it'll be right there in front of them. And we can
Mhm.
do that through videos, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Thank you very much, brothers and sisters. May Allah protect you, and may Allah protect your children and your families. And we'll see you next week, inshallah.
All of us,
جزاكم الله
inshallah.
خير. السلام عليكم.
Salam
Alaykum
alaikum.
salam wa rahmatullah.
Shukran.
Salam alaikum.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.